few questions.
Mr. Hegar, yield.
Yes, Glenn, what's your question?
My cousin,
Brother,
Senator,
what you usually say.
by waiting another 2 years, is it not true that the insurance
Is this
industry
the Board of
will pretty
Education?
much, they'll get their way?
Are you talking about the Board of Education or
No, I'm talking
TDI?
about insurance.
Oh, okay. I just wanted clarification. I'm sorry. I didn't hear quite.
Now, you all didn't want the Board of Education in there. So I'm talking about insurance. Board of Education doesn't get reviewed at all. And the harsh reality is, by putting TDI in the sunset again, they essentially don't get reviewed either. I mean, as long as we have gone without...
We do not. Let me say this, Senator. What happens is that any of the efforts that we worked on this session did not become law. Much like the efforts that we worked on, we know for sure with the Racing Commission and the affordable housing, those don't occur. And
well,
so much like you remember back in...
But on insurance,
yes,
industry didn't want it. They didn't want a bill to pass. And by putting them back in the process for 2 years, they win. I mean, is that a fair assessment? They win.
In my assessment, I think Texas consumers are worse under current law than what we passed out of this chamber.
Well, let me ask you this. What were the sticking points in a conference committee for the Texas issues, the disagreements that would keep us from having a bill?
I'm sorry, in the conference?
Between the House bill and the Senate bill on the insurance, just on
actually,
TDI.
Senator, the Texas Department of Insurance bill passed this chamber, and it went over to the House and got put on major state, and we never got to conference. So we never had any sticking points on TDI because that bill never made it to conference. The bill itself.
Well, the bill did make it to conference, but I know there were discussions about trying to find some middle ground to get a bill passed. And if there had been a consensus, then a bill would have passed.
I cannot speak to those, Senator, because we never got that far in the process, and since the House never had that debate on the floor, I really don't know what those sticking points were between this chamber and that chamber. I can only guess what they might be, but that would be factually incorrect for me to assume.
Well, as you know, a number of us on this floor voted against the TDI bill when it came out of this chamber because we didn't think that it went far enough.
I understand.
And now by putting it back through the sunset process for another 2 years, it doesn't do anything. I mean, my sense was the House wanted to pass a more consumer-friendly bill than the one we were able to get out of this chamber.
I really don't know the answer to that because they never had the opportunity to have the debate on the floor. Much the same as any of the other state agencies. I just don't know. But I hope that next session we get to find that out because I think Texas consumers deserve to have greater protections than they have today. And I would really look forward to us to having that debate in 2 more years.
Well, I hope by it going back through the sunset process again, just this one agency, I hope that it's an issue in the next cycle so that the consumers pay attention, because the harsh reality is for far too long, the insurance companies end up getting their way. So, but it'll make it difficult for me to vote for this bill, as important as it is for those other agencies to go through the process. To put TDI back through it again, I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm not saying it's your fault, Glenn, the other Glenn in this chamber.
Is it the other Glenn's fault? No.
Well,
we passed the bill out of here.
If I had my way, you know, we would have gotten the bill a lot stronger out of here, and I think it would have made it over there.
I think if I wish that we would have got further along. These did not pass. I feel very disturbed that one of the agencies is being put back in this safety net. There were some interest groups in this building that I think hung in the darkness and didn't come out and negotiate in good faith, in my opinion. But they're going to have a chance to get it right this next time. And
well, of course,
we will have the opportunity
wanting it to die. I mean, you had a lot of folks.
I think you have a lot of big interest in this building, unfortunately, on some of these different state agencies. And I tell you, I think you and I share a disgust for that.
Well, you know, the reality is at some point, if we can't get a consumer-friendly bill passed, maybe that agency ought to be sunsetted. Because the alternative is we'll come back in 2 years after these statewide elections, by the way, and then end up in the same dilemma. We just have to decide we're going to keep rolling it over every 2 years.
Well,
do we ever stand up?
We will not do that. I know in 03 and 05, at least when I was across the rotunda serving as a House member, I remember then that we were not able to get certain bills passed with TEA. We were not able to pass TDCJ. And so what did we do? We rolled them on over.
But on this one, the problem is on this one, Senator, how do we go back and say to our constituents that after all these years, we couldn't take the Texas Department of Insurance through the sunset process, make meaningful reforms and pass a bill? We can't just say, well, it didn't get on major state.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I think that all of us as legislators are obviously accountable when we go back home to our districts, and we have to have that discussion on what agencies passed through this process and what agencies did not, just the same as we must be accountable for every single piece of legislation that goes through this body. We have to answer to people as to why it did not pass, why did something better not occur. And I will say this, I think if this agency is not put back under sunset, I would like to quote something that I heard the other Glenn say one time. I can tell you what's going to happen. If this agency does not exist, you know what will happen? Those insurance companies will do what you said once before. They really will go hog wild. And Texas consumers cannot afford them going, as you said, hog wild.
Well, the reality is they win either way.
Oh, I think they would get much better in an unregulated market.
Well, as long as they can keep a lock on this building, they win either way.
Yeah, well,
they can't pass meaningful reforms out of this chamber, and then when they go to the other side, they do as much as they can to make sure you just don't have a consensus, so you don't have anything.
I would disagree, Senator, in all due respect. We worked in your committee very hard. I have the privilege of serving 2 sessions under you as your vice chair. We worked very hard on that legislation. And I would disagree that legislation, it actually improved the rights of Texas consumers. It made provisions stronger than current law, and I think Texas consumers lost.
Simple issues like prior approval, something that even the department will admit, even in private, that they need. I mean, those meaningful reforms, we couldn't move them out of here. A lot of it was lip service, with all due respect, Senator.
Well, I appreciate that, but with all due respect back, I think that we have differences on how we accomplish meaningful reform, real reform, and something that will effectually make lower rates for Texas taxpayers. They deserve that, Senator.
Well, I'm going to respectfully vote against this because I don't know how else to put a spotlight on the influence that the insurance industry has on this process. So my vote, even if it's the only one against it.
I can say one thing. As you and I worked on that legislation, I know it didn't have any influence as we worked it through your committee.
We made it a lot better. But let me tell you,
we said
it didn't go nearly as far as it ought to go.
It had no influence when we were working on it together.
You know, even something as drastic as having an elected commissioner, to be honest with you, is something that ought to be on the table because I don't know of any other way to break down the influence of this particular.
And during that process over the interim, when we were doing sunset review, Senator Hinojosa brought that issue forward as one of the members on the commission. We talked about it. If I remember, I think Senator Gallegos carried an amendment as to that, if I remember correctly. Senator, is that correct? And so we had that discussion. There's a difference in opinions, obviously, whether elected is going to get us there or not.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, thank you.